Hello dear chess fans, my name is Eugene Grinis. Welcome to my free chess school, from beginners to advanced, open for everyone who wants to improve own game. This video is intended for the beginners. Playing chess is very much like being a commander in a war. You are in control of all your pieces. Some beginners make the mistake of bringing out only one or two pieces, while leaving the rest of their army on their original squares. To play a good game, it's important to try to coordinate all of the pieces in your army. Chess openings have been written about for centuries, but new books on the subject appear all the time. World champion Tigran Petrosian wrote, "Today, many players, especially young ones, think that the older openings are so thoroughly analyzed that nothing more can be tried. This is a serious mistake. The methods of positional play become deeper and finer each year. Being well acquainted with them, it is possible even in openings which seem to be fully explored to find ways to create a real fight. Chess has so many possible move orders, even in the opening phase of the game, that it's humanly impossible to commit them all to memory. Most players become specialists on a very small number of openings in order to avoid unfamiliar territory. Chess is typically divided into three phases: the opening, the middle game, and the endgame. The opening refers to the initial series of moves, generally lasting the first 10 moves. There is no rule saying when the opening must end, but it is considered to be finished when the majority of pieces have been developed and both sides have castled. The opening phase of the game is all about mobilization your forces as quickly and as efficiently as possible. The third world champion, Capablanca, wrote, "The game might be divided into three parts: the opening, the middle game, and the end game. There is one thing you must strive for: to be equally efficient in the three parts." And Grandmaster Savielly Tartakower said, "A chess game is divided into three stages. The first, when you hope you have the advantage. The second, when you believe that you have an advantage. And the third, when you know you are going to lose." Capablanca wrote, "You may learn much more from a game you lose than from a game you win. You will have to lose hundreds of games before becoming a good player." And Bobby Fischer said, "You can only get good at chess if you love the game." There are many chess openings. Some are named after players, some are named after locations. Openings are defined and categorized by their pawn structure and piece placement. At the start of the game, pawns open lines for your pieces to take advantage of. Openings the most frequently played opening moves is e4 and d4. e4 is the most frequently played opening move because it does the most to help you develop your pieces or move the pieces of their starting position. The move e4 opens a line for both the queen and the bishop. They are now free to move off of their starting positions. If black responds e4 with e5, you have a position that can be classified as a double king pawn, which is a type of opening known as an open game. But these opening moves are not yet an opening because they don't have a name. If now, however, white continues with bishop e4, you have yourself a named opening. This position is called the bishop's opening. In this video, you will learn about using all of your pieces to fight for the center of the board. You will see why it's important to develop your knights before your bishops and why you should limit the number of early pawn moves. The center of the chessboard forms the high ground in a chess battle. If you dominate the center of the board, your attacks are very likely to succeed. The absolute center consists of the four squares d4, d5, e4 and e5. From the very beginning of the game, you want to fight for control over these squares. Capablanca wrote, the four squares e4, e5, d4 and d5 are the center squares, and control of these squares is called control of the center. The control of the center is of great importance. No violent attack can succeed without controlling at least two of these squares and possibly three. Many a maneuver in the opening has for its sole object the control of the center, which invariably ensures the initiative. It is well always to bear this in mind. The two most common first moves for white are e4 and d4, if you open the game with e4, you can see that the pawn already occupies one of the key center squares and controls another central square d5. Notice also that the white bishop on f1 and the white queen on d1 gain the ability to move out. White's other main possibility at the beginning of the game is d4. Here too, the pawn occupies one of the central squares and helps control another key square, e5. In this case, the move provides additional mobility for the white bishop on c1 and carries the obvious second move threat of e4. d4 players who prefer e4 tend to be highly tactical players. Players who prefer highly complicated contests that require careful calculation. By contrast, players who open the game with d4 tend to be more positional players who prefer more strategic approach to chess. World champion Anatoly Karpov said, "I like e4 very much, but my results are better with d4. And also I have found after d4 there are more opportunities for richer play." The first world champion Wilhelm Steinitz said, "The king pawn and the queen pawn are the only ones to be moved in the early part of the game." It's not so much the exact sequence of moves that matters, but the position you arrive at. As long as you understand the general ideas behind that position, you'll be able to navigate through tons of possibilities at your disposal. The sixth world champion, Mikhail Botvinnik, wrote, "Memorizing of variations could be even worse than playing in a tournament without looking in the books at all." And Savielly Tartakower said, "It is said that an ounce of common sense can outweigh a ton of variations." People have different styles of play when it comes to chess. Your style doesn't necessarily have anything to do with how you behave in real life. You may be shy and retiring in your everyday encounters, but a real tiger when it comes to chess, or vice versa. The first world champion, Wilhelm Steinitz, said, "I may be an old lion, but if someone puts his finger in my mouth, I'll bite it off." There is no right or wrong chess style. Ask yourself what appeals to you the most about chess. Do you always want to be the aggressor and go on the attack at all costs? If you don't know what type of chess player you are, browse through openings from each type and see which one appeals to you the most. Wilhelm Steinitz wrote, "The task of the positional player is systematically to accumulate slight advantages and try to convert temporary advantages into permanent ones." And Savielly Tartakower said, the tactician must know what to do whenever something needs doing. The strategist must know what to do when nothing needs doing. The opening theory in chess proceeds on certain simple assimilations. In the initial position, white, because of the extra move, has a slight advantage. Consequently, white's problem in the opening is to secure the better position, while black's problem is to secure equality. There are two fundamental concepts in the opening: development and the center. Development is getting the pieces out. The center consists of the 4 squares in the geometrical center of the board. The basic principle is that it is essential in the opening to develop all the pieces harmoniously and in such a way as to secure the most favorable position possible in the center. There are some practical rules for beginners which are usually worth remembering, though the more experts player will be aware of the many exceptions. These rules are: rule number 1. Open with either the E pawn or the D pawn. The most frequently played openings moves is E4 because it does the most to help you develop your pieces or move the pieces off their starting position. Rule number 2. Wherever possible, make a good developing move which threatens something. The most common opening strategy is to use the center pawns and minor pieces, the bishops and knights, to control the 4 central squares. If these pieces are centralized and your opponent's pieces are not, you'll generally have more space, which means more mobility and more power. Most pieces gain more mobility when you move them toward the center, which is called centralization. A knight, for example, has significantly less mobility on the edge of the board than it does in the center. It's common in various chess openings to use the threat of winning material to gain time or space. A developing move that also threatens to win material can be very powerful. Rule number 3. Develop knights before bishops. The second world champion, Emanuel Lasker, wrote, "I have added these principles to the law. Get the knights into action before both bishops are developed. There are exceptions, but moving bishops first can cause time later, because the bishop may be posted on a square that in a few moves, if not immediately, could be attacked. Most of time, it's fairly clear where the knights should be developed. The best square for the bishop becomes apparent a bit later." Rule number 4. Pick the most suitable square for a piece and develop it there once and for all. Capablanca wrote, "Before development has been completed, no piece should be moved more than once, unless it is essential in order to obtain either material advantage or to secure freedom of action." Keep in mind that every move in chess is important. Beginners often make the mistake of moving the same piece or a small number of pieces over and over again. In the early part of the game, try to place your pieces on strong natural squares, squares that will help to control the centers or control key diagonals. Try not to move a piece more than once or at most twice in the first 10 moves of the game, unless by doing so you can capture a piece or force your opponent to retreat. In other words, don't start attacking until all or at least most of your pieces are developed. Rule number 5. Make 1 or 2 pawn moves in the opening, not more. Capablanca wrote, "The student is warned against playing pawns in preference to pieces at the beginning of the game, especially pawn to rook's third, a3 and h3, which are moves very commonly indulged in by beginners. Quick development is one of the main keys to success in chess. The winner of the game is often the player who, after just 10 moves, has the most pieces bearing down on the center. With that in mind, early pawn moves that do not have a bearing on the center could be a waste of time. Certainly, early in the game, try to limit the number of moves made by pawns on the A, B, G, and H files. Rule number 6. Do not bring your queen out early. Rule number 7. Castle as soon as possible, preferably on the king's side. Most chess openings feature castling, which provides a certain measure of security for the king and frees up the rest of the pieces for action. You want to invest the minimum amount of material possible to defend the king, so that you can go on the attack with as much force as possible. Rule number 8. Play to get control of the center. The center of the chessboard forms the high ground in a chess battle. If you dominate the center of the board, your attacks are very likely to succeed. Rule number 9. Always try to maintain at least one pawn in the center. Rule number 10. Do not sacrifice without a clear reason. Rule number 11. Complete your development before you attack. All too often beginners tend to begin their attacks before they have completed developing their pieces. Be sure to develop first, then attack. Rule number 12. Pay attention to your opponent's moves. Is your opponent threatening to capture one of your pieces? Did your opponent leave a piece undefended where it can be successfully captured at little or no cost to you? Rule number 13. Avoid exchanging bishops for knights. Bishops tend to be more useful than knights. Exchanging a bishop for a knight too early in the game is a very risky strategy. Capablanca wrote, "A bishop will often be worth more than 3 pawns, but a knight very seldom so, and may even not be worth so much." Although the knight is generally considered to be on a par with the bishop in strength, the latter piece is somewhat stronger in the majority of cases in which they are opposed to each other. Rule number 14. Fight for space. From the very start, it is wise to gain space. The most common way to achieve more space is through the center. For more space, place your pawns in the center of the board and develop pieces around those central squares. The main objective is to move your minor pieces and pawns to squares that allow you to control the most number of squares on your opponent's half of the board. Essentially, the center and space go hand in hand. Also, do not move your pieces to vulnerable squares where they can be easily attacked or pushed back. Almost every grandmaster believes that centralization is the key idea to fight for space. When your pieces are in the center, they are mobile and have more options. When your pieces control more squares, they have more power. This is the best time to go after your opponent's king or attack the main weakness of your opponent's position. If this can be done immediately, grab more space to make it more difficult for your opponent to mobilize his pieces. Any move which in accordance with the basic principle is normal. Any move which is not is abnormal. Thus, e4, which places a pawn in the center and aids the development of king side, is normal, while h4, which helps neither development nor the center, is abnormal. Similarly, after e4, e5, knight f3, developing and threatening a center pawn is normal, while b3, which develops a relatively unimportant piece and does not affect the center, is abnormal. A chess opening can become popular simply because a famous player uses it. Play what you like and don't worry about chess fashion. If you feel an intuitive attraction to any particular opening, pay attention to that feeling. Matching the right opening to your style of play makes you a better player. Emanuel Lasker said, "Show me 3 variations in the leading handbook on the openings, and I will show you 2 of those 3 that are defective." The 4th world champion, Alexander Alekhine, wrote, "Young players expose themselves to grave risks when they blindly imitate the innovations of masters without themselves first checking all the details and consequences of their innovations." Tigran Petrosian said, "What I value more than anything in chess is logic. I am firmly convinced that in chess there is nothing accidental. I believe only in logical, correct play." The beginning moves of a chess game, the first phase of the game, are called the opening. Some players spend years memorizing long opening variations, but you can get far in chess with a firm understanding of just a few key principles. Make sure that you fight for control of the center of the board. In your fight for the center, try to limit the number of your pawn moves. Before you attack, try to develop most of your pieces on squares that help control the center and from which they can't easily be attacked. Chess openings all share certain fundamental characteristic: time, space, material, pawn structure, and king safety. Carefully watch the moves that your opponent makes. If your opponent makes a move that threatens something, it's often best to eliminate that threat before you continue with your development. The element of time in chess is called development. Development refers to how quickly and effectively you deploy your forces. A move that increases the mobility of pieces is called a developing move. The power of the pieces is tied to their mobility. The player who develops his pieces to effective squares most efficiently has more power to command. If you make a move that doesn't increase your mobility, you may be wasting time. Because white has the first move, white starts out with a slight advantage in time. Capablanca wrote, "As the pieces are set on the board, both sides have the same position and the same amount of material. White, however, has the move, and the move in this case means the initiative. And the initiative, other things being equal, is an advantage." Chess has too many possibilities to memorize. The 5 elements: material, time, space, pawn structure, and king safety can help guide you through openings. Tigran Petrosian said, "In almost any position, the boundless possibilities of chess enable a new, or at least a little studied, continuation to be found." Now, let's take a look at the following game. It is important not to bring the queen out too early. If you do, you might find that your opponent is able to attack the queen and make it move again and again, often a clear waste of time. e4, e5, queen h5. White has broken the rule number 6 and posted his queen very aggressively on just the second move. At first glance, you might wonder why the move is so bad. After all, the queen attacks the undefended black pawn on e5, and you have to see this threat as black. The queen's move, however, offers black a simple way to develop effectively. First, black can defend the e5 pawn by developing the knight to c6, the best continuation. But not g6, attacking the queen. A huge mistake. This is exactly what white wanted. Queen takes pawn on e5, check. Queen fork. The queen attacks not only the black's king on e8, but also the black's rook on h8. Queen e7. Queen takes rook on h8. White has an extra rook. Knight c6 was played. Bishop c4. White threatens mate in 1 on f7, and you have to see this threat as black. Since the e5 pawn is protected by knight, black can now advance the g pawn to g6, gaining time by attacking the queen and getting ready to develop the knight from g8 to f6, and probably the bishop from f8 to g7. Queen f3. White threatens mate in 1 on f7, and you have to see this threat as black. Knight f6, developing the knight. Queen b3. This is already a huge mistake that has to be punished by black. Knight d4, attacking the queen. Bishop takes pawn on f7, check. King e7. Queen c4, protecting the bishop on f7 and the c2 pawn. b5, attacking the queen. Now the queen can't protect the bishop anymore. Queen c3. The bishop on f7 could be taken by the king, but black plays even stronger. Knight takes pawn on e4, attacking the queen. Queen d3, attacking the knight on e4. If queen e3, then follows knight takes pawn on c2, check, attacking the king, the queen, and the rook simultaneously. A knight family fork. Queen f1, knight takes queen on e3, check, pawn takes knight, king takes bishop on f7. Black has the extra queen and wins. We are going back to knight takes pawn on e4, queen d3. Knight c5, attacking the queen. Queen c3. King takes bishop on f7, defending the knight on c5 with the bishop. Knight f3, developing the knight. Queen f6. Knight takes knight on d4. Pawn takes knight. attacking the queen. Queen h3. d5, attacking the queen with the bishop on c8. Queen g3. Bishop d6, developing the bishop with a tempo and attacking the queen. Queen f3. Rook e8 check, developing the rook with a tempo. King f1. King takes queen. Pawn takes queen on f3. Now, can you find mate in 2 in this position? Please pause the video. Excellent. Bishop h3 check. King g1, the only move. And now comes a punishment for all the previous white's play. Can you see it? Please pause the video. Rook e1, checkmate. Don't develop your queen early. Most of the time you will want to develop your knights, bishops, and perhaps also your rooks before you bring out your queen. The queen is so valuable that it is difficult early on to be sure exactly where the queen belongs. If you advance your queen into the middle of the board, your opponent will have a chance to develop his knights, bishops, and rooks, and at the same time attack your queen. You will lose valuable development opportunities because you will have to move your queen over and over again, while your opponent will be properly developing many pieces. Rather than develop the queen too early, where it might be attacked, and assist your opponent development, try developing all your other pieces first. Now let's take a look at the following game. e4, e5, knight f3, attacking the e5 pawn, f6, protecting the e5 pawn with the f pawn. A bad move. White has lead in development, and black has weakened his king position by playing f6. Better was knight c6. Now white already can try to punish black, sacrificing the knight. Knight takes pawn on e5. Pawn takes knight on e5. Queen h5 check. Queen fork. King e7. If g6 attacking the queen, then queen takes pawn on e5 check, queen fork, white picks up the rook on h8, queen e7, queen takes rook on h8, queen takes pawn on e4 check, king d1, and white is winning. Let's go back to the game. Queen h5 check, king e7. Queen takes pawn on e5 check. King f7, the only move. Bishop c4 check. White pieces come out with gain of time. King g6. Queen f5 check. King h6, the only move. d4 check. g5. h4, the best move. Black cannot stave off white's threats. For example, d5, queen f7, the best continuation. Black has no defense. For instance, pawn takes bishop on c4, pawn takes pawn on g5, checkmate, pawn mate. King g7 was played. Queen f7 check. King h6, the only move. Pawn takes pawn on g5, checkmate, pawn mate. Okay, that's the lesson for today from the Eugene Grinis Chess School. I hope it was useful and you enjoyed it. If so, push likes, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and leave comments. Please use the options below the video, like, subscribe, share in your social network. Add to your playlist on your YouTube channel. Thanks for donations to my YouTube channel. You can find the corresponding link in video description. And the last question for today. Can you find an Easter egg in this video? It is of course about viewing of video online on YouTube. Only then it is possible to open the description and to look in it for the words Easter egg. It is also possible to look what new appears in the last 10 seconds of the video, paying attention to Easter egg. Goodbye.